Hey guys, it's Lexi from Hair and Makeup by _Padilla, and I want to first give a quick shout out to my brother for making that awesome video intro. I will link all of his stuff down below, and if you haven't yet, definitely go check out my Instagram. It is Hair and Makeup by _Padilla, same way it is spelled here, so definitely go check that out if you haven't yet. This is my friend Gwen, and she's going to be talking about her story with physical abuse and her STD that she got from her relationship.
I love how that was so well rehearsed. That was so great up there for a while. My kind of story with my abuse and my journey through my relationships, I want to say began when I was about 16. I can't quite remember if it's a sophomore or a junior in high school. It's been a few years. But I was always the kind of girl when I was younger, I never really wanted a relationship. I never really saw the interest in having boyfriends or having girlfriends and going on dates. I never really saw a point until you started driving, because then at that point it just felt like a play date to me. But I never had really any interest anyways. And it wasn't until that this situation came along and this person came along that I felt comfortable enough to dive into that portion and kind of progress into having relationships. I met this guy, we'll call him John.
Why was I thinking John?
John Doe, I don't know.
Okay, anyways. I was literally like, John. Then you said John.
And I met him through my friend's Snapchat. So I had taken her phone and was Snapchatting her streaks. And I had met this guy and we talked a little bit and he added me on my Snapchat. And so then we became friends and we were friends with each other for a year. Mind you, it was like an online friendship. I knew this guy lived in the same city that I did, but had never met him in person. And it wasn't until that I had a bad experience going out on my first date with another random guy who I had been talking to for 5 days. That was the worst decision of my life. He asked me to go to the soccer field with him to play soccer. I showed up, was in my cleats with a bunch of soccer balls, and he showed up in flip-flops and had other ideas. So after he had kind of like tried to kiss me, I was like, no, and left the situation and went to go consult my friend about it at the time on Snapchat to talk about what happened. It was then that he was like, oh, I'm so sorry that date was so poor, and he confessed his feelings to me. And it was in the summer that we went out on our first date, and whew, it was a sketchy date too. There's these like underground like sewer tunnels that run underneath the city, and he took me into one of them and we walked for, I don't know, I want to say a mile. I know that's so stupid. We walked for a while in there that you couldn't see like the light from the outside, and then we just sat down and talked. It was the sketchiest stuff ever, but apparently I decided I like this guy. Maybe that should have been a warning.
Red flag number 1.
You'd think. So then we started meeting up a little bit more and more and talking more, and everything was going great. We went to a few school dances together. I didn't really notice any, let me back up, there was some more red flags. I noticed
at the time,
that.
did you not realize they were red flags, and now looking back you notice they're red flags? Or did you notice then that they were kind of like red flags?
I noticed then that they were red flags, but back then I didn't know how to act in a relationship, and I didn't know, I was not a confrontational person. I was not an assertive person, so I was not someone that was gonna come up and be like, why are you doing this, you know? So I think I did confront him at one point, but I just let it be because I really was just like, you know, whatever you want to do. But he had very volatile friends, which I do believe was the reason for a lot of who he was and what happened was not necessarily stuff that he wanted to do, but things that his friends pressured him to do. So he was drunk often at the age of 15 or 16, getting into trouble with police or getting into near trouble with police. It just wasn't good, and he would lie about where he was or what he was doing a lot of times, and that's what kind of I'll preface later in the story, which led me to believe that he was cheating on me and whatever happened. But it was the day after Christmas when it happened, and we were making gingerbread houses. And I was wearing like his sweatshirt and a pair of jeans. And at the time I really loved American Horror Story. And I begged him, I was like, let's watch the first episode, let's watch the first episode. Like, it's my favorite, I want to share this with you. And he was like, okay. So we sat on the couch in the living room and we started watching the show. And my mom and my sister are just down the hallway. And all of a sudden he starts like kind of pushing, pressuring. And in the past he had been kind of pressuring anyways, and I had just kind of blew it off and I didn't want to do anything. So I didn't really engage in anything, but I didn't tell him like no or to stop because I thought that that was normal. And eventually he had kind of cornered me on the couch and stood over me and forced himself on me. At that, it was kind of your like fight or flight type of moment, and at that point I just froze because I didn't know what was happening, and it was so painful. Like, I can't even describe to you the amount of pain that I felt. And he stopped, and my dad had gotten there, so I had gotten out and gotten in the car, and he had left. And it wasn't until later that my dad had dropped me back off at my house that I went to go take in a shower, and I remember like a vivid memory of me just sitting on the floor and watching all of the blood flow out of me because he had torn up my insides. And I didn't say anything until later on FaceTime. I said, that wasn't consensual. I didn't want that. And he started sobbing and was like, oh, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. And I forgave him, which now I wish I didn't, but again, at the time, like, I was young and I didn't know anything, so I forgave him and we stayed together. His parents had looked at our messages, and from what they read, they thought that we were having sex consensually, and they wanted him to break up with me and to leave me, and they called me a whore. And at the time I was going to the dermatologist for acne medicine, so I would say, I'm pretty sure it was like the 4th or the 5th of January, the next week. I had went in to go get my normal like checkup, and I had pointed out that I had some sort of lesion on my vagina, and I was like, I don't know what's wrong, it's so painful. And she goes, well, let me check. And my mom is also in the waiting room too. Or not in the waiting room, in the doctor's office with me. And so she checks and she goes, I think that might be herpes, but we have to test for sure. And my mom looks at me and she goes, have you been having sex? And I nodded, because I didn't really know what else to say. And we got in the car, we drove home. My mom did not talk to me for days. And I didn't know how to explain to her that it wasn't something that I wanted, because I was so shocked too. I didn't know what was happening to me. So we went and we tested, and I tested positive for herpes simplex 1. And finally I told my mom that I did not want it. And after that, she was extremely supportive. I told my dad as well. She helped me through a lot of the healing process, and tried to understand what I had and what was going on, because I feel like the school system failed me in the respect that I did not understand at all what STDs were. And it's daunting to wake up and realize that you're stuck with something that nobody wants, and you're gonna be stuck with it forever. And especially at the age of 16, you're like, that's terrifying. And it was very hard to get to a stage of self-love. And I was thinking as I was getting ready in the bathroom this morning, when I really reached that spot where I started to accept myself and accept my STD. And I had actually gone on a Disney cruise. And I had met this guy on the Disney cruise, who we are still good friends to this day. And he had grabbed my hand and he pulled me up to the top of the ship. There was like this little private conference room, and he locked the door. And we just sat on the couch and we talked for as long as we could. And I finally spilled it out. I was like, you know, I got this STD from a bad situation. I want to say this was about 6 months later, or maybe 4 months. And he was the first person that really looked at me and was like, hey, you know, it happens, and you are still so incredibly strong and beautiful that your STD does not define you, and it doesn't bother me one bit. And that was really the moment that I started to think that maybe I could get through it and maybe I could be loved again. Unfortunately, that took kind of a darker turn. Okay, about 6 months later, I was at work and I had met a guy. And in my mind, I went through definitely a lot of PTSD symptoms. And one of them was that no matter what I did, I could not look or talk to tall blonde men at all. If I saw one, I would freeze and I would automatically break down crying. So as soon as this kid walked in to work to start working, I froze and I got so upset that I went into the break room and took a break. And there he was, and I was shocked by how much he resembled John. Like, the resemblance was almost uncanny. And in my mind, and it wasn't until I realized years later that I wanted to recreate the relationship that I had with John, with this boy, to have a more happy ending, I guess, subconsciously, was what I was thinking. I started talking to this guy outside. He would take me on, you know, like to go get Taco Bell or drive around. And it wasn't until deeper into the summer that the abuse started. And it was slow at first. It was a lot of gaslighting and saying like, I never said that, you did this, you know, just things I didn't do or things I didn't say. He would block the entrances to work so I wouldn't be able to leave without getting out of my car and talking to him. He would follow me, and I didn't really know what to do. I started coming over to his house, and it was just more verbal abuse at that point. His parents didn't know I would have to sneak into the window or sneak through the sliding glass door, or his parents weren't home at all, but they had no idea at the time. And then the physical abuse kind of came. I would have big like handprints on my body, specifically my butt, because he would slap me so hard that I would have handprints left over. One time, I would say my biggest memory, one day, I had showed up to his house and I had had the flu. And he threatened me oftentimes that if I didn't come over, something bad would happen. And I had tried to cut it off with him multiple times, and he would form fake numbers and keep calling me and keep texting me on these fake numbers to a point where I felt like I couldn't ignore it and I would have to go back to talking with him. So finally he called me and I said, I don't want to talk to you anymore, and he said, well, you gave me your STD, which I knew was false because we had never done anything up to that point that would constitute me giving him my STD. And so he wanted me to come to his house that day to show me the doctor's note claiming that he had the STD. So I had a flu, and I came over with a flu, and as soon as I stepped in the door, he said, I ordered pizza, go pick it up. So I said, okay, got back in the car, drove 15 minutes, walked in the door, and it was a $40, $50 order. And I had to pay for it. So I paid for it and drove back, and I wasn't allowed to eat any of it. And then we were sitting on his bed and my friend called, and he took the phone away from me and answered the phone and was like, she's not here right now. And I tried to fight with him for it, and he shoved me in the closet and leaned against it. And as I was kind of banging in the dark room, I was so upset that I couldn't get to my phone and he had my property. It was frightening. And so as soon as he let me out, he forced my head down on his penis to give him a blowjob while I had the flu. And that was extremely... It was not good. Not a fan. Again, it was something that I didn't want, but I was scared that with all of the threats he was making against me, that I had no other choice but to comply. And my parents didn't know about this either. He knew where I lived, where I worked, where I went to school, who I hung out with. He knew all of my friends. If he didn't like the people in my life, and he didn't like most of them, he would go online, find them on social media, and bully them out of my life. So I lost pretty much everybody until I only relied on him. And when I would want to leave, all of a sudden he would turn around and start to be nice and start to take me out on dates and take me to the movies. So I fell for that trap, and I fell for that cycle where I just kept going and going and going. And finally, one day he called me up and he said, if you have sex with me, I will leave you alone. I know that's what you want more than anything, and I will give it to you. You just have to have sex with me. And I was like, okay. And I was so relieved. I didn't even think about anything else. For the first time, I was like, thank God, I can finally be free. And this came a few days after my dance recital, where we were just about to go on for the opening number, and he told me that he was going to kill me and he was going to ruin my life. Then I had to dance through the entire recital, scared for my life. And then after he had texted me that, I just felt nothing but relief. So I drove over there and we did it. And I left, and he kept his promise, and he left me alone. And it wasn't until a few months later, my coworker had sent me a message, and it was a message that this guy had sent him that asked him if he wanted our sex tapes together or videos of me. And he clearly outlined all of the times that he forced me to give him a blowjob, as well as the sex that we had had and the different positions. And said that he had had videos of everything, and he wanted to spread them to my workplace and to my school. Thankfully, my coworker had sent me these messages, and the next step that I made was finally telling my parents what had happened, and the first thing my mom did was took me down to the police station to file a police report. After that, we went to the courthouse and filled out documents for a protection order, and about a week later they served the papers to him. And I knew that because he texted my coworker saying that he never sent any of that to him, and we were just trying to ruin his life. And all my coworkers sent in return was the screenshots of his messages saying the exact same thing that he said. When I filled out the paper, when you go to fill out a protection order, they give you a piece of printer paper to write all of your experiences and why you deserve a protection order. And mine was 2 pages, front to back, of everything that he did to me in the span of 3 months that I could remember. And then after that it was gone. But then it was a healing process, trying to figure out how to have a healthy relationship and how to heal from, my PTSD, and proceed on with having a normal life, I guess I could say. And it was then that it took a lot of building and work to get where I am today. It took a lot of me to believe that I was not the reason for my abuse, and that there was nothing that I could do to prevent it. I would say shout out shout out to one of the biggest things I would say helped me was this book that I had read in my senior creative writing class. She had assigned us just a book to read, or maybe I was reading it on my own time. Who knows? I believe I did it for a project. But it was about this girl. It was a true story. She wrote a book about how she survived being assaulted at school and the school didn't believe her. And that helped me realize that it was not my fault. And that really was, I would say, the biggest step in me starting to acknowledge what happened, because at that point I had just shoved it down and didn't want to talk about it. And so that really, after I would read a few chapters, I would sit in my car and cry, because it just hit me so hard. It related to me that was me, and there was hope to keep going. Yeah, so I would say that's pretty much the end of my story, talking about my abuse. We're in a good, stable relationship now.
We love a queen that's in a good relationship now.
Going on 2 years. We're there.
Was there any really obvious signs that you were in an abusive relationship right away, or did you kind of feel like it slowly started to become worse and then one day you're like, oh my gosh, I'm in an abusive relationship?
I'd say one day.
You just realized one day oh my gosh, how did I even get here?
Yeah. Although it progressed over a few months the second time, coming from a girl who never had a relationship before that was real, that was stable, that was how it was supposed to be, and her only examples of a relationship are her parents, divorce and ugly, marriage and divorce, as well as friends who kind of don't know what they're doing either. It's hard to notice that stuff until it's too late.
I think you kind of already answered this, but did you ever feel guilty afterwards? After everything happened? It was your fault, or you deserved it, or you felt guilty because you wanted out of the relationship?
I lost everything. I lost my relationship with my parents. I lost pretty much all of my friends. It took me years to have the courage to go back and reach out to these people who had no clue what was going on, who thought that I just up and left, that I just disappeared. And it took a lot for me to go to them and say, you know, hey, I was getting the crap beaten out of me. And, you know, apologize, even though I didn't feel like I necessarily had to apologize or explain, but I wanted to reach out and let them know that I wasn't that kind of person to just up and leave, that I was really going through this tough time that I couldn't speak about. That was about half of them. The other half were aware of it, and were so frustrated that I couldn't leave the relationship that they left.
Yeah.
And I had to have the same conversation with them as well, where I said, you know, you left me. That's hard, to look at someone and, you know, say, you left me, but I understand why.
Yeah, I feel like that's very common. Like, people that are outside of the relationship don't understand how hard it is for you to walk away, and like how guilty you feel when you're in that position, and they don't understand how hard it is to actually be like, okay, I'm gonna walk away from this relationship, especially one that you were in where they were abusive, because you were probably having fears that they would do something to you if you did try to break up with them, or they would tell someone, or like they would spill like your videos or your secrets, your insecurities to like everyone. And I feel like a lot of people don't understand that part of relationships, especially like mental or physical, that like it's so much harder to leave than just saying break up with them. Like, you know they're not good, like, you know they're not good, but it's so much harder to actually take those steps and be like, okay, I can't keep living like this.
Yeah, you can't just get up one day and realize that it's abuse and walk out.
Mm-hmm.
Because unfortunately, I am one of few that are very lucky to be in a situation that I was able to escape. The majority of women who are in abusive relationships do end up dead, which is so scary. A lot of them will realize their abuse, but they'll never be able to make it out. And I'm very thankful that I was able, and I had the support from my family to be able to escape and to stay out and to rebuild.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of the times people that are mentally or physically abusive, they make it so hard for you to leave because they play so many games with your mind. They make you feel like you're the guilty one. They make you feel like it's all on you, and then it's so much harder to actually walk away from that situation because of how they make you feel. So it's definitely not as easy as being like, okay, I'm gonna leave, because you feel all these terrible feelings that are
Yeah, it's the circle of abuse. It's, oh, I'm gonna be so nice to you and buy you flowers and take you on dates, but then I'm gonna take you home and blame everything that's wrong in my life on you and beat you up, but then the next day apologize with breakfast. It's never ending.
And it's like, they could do 1 week of being super freaking nice, and then the next week they're just mean and hurtful, and they just like they say things that like a caring person that's supposed to love you should not be saying, and then the next week they're back to being super freaking nice, and it's just like it goes back and forth. It goes a day and then they're mean again, then they're nice and then they're mean, and like it's a cycle.
My coworkers actually noticed halfway through the second time around with my abuse, and they all got in a group together and they cornered me one day, and they were like, show us your body, and they pulled up my sleeves and they saw all of the bruises that I had, that I had tried to cover with like my turtleneck, and my long sleeves, and their mouths dropped. And they looked at me and they're like, you have to get out. And I remember looking at them and saying, no.
Yeah, it's not that easy. I feel like so many people don't understand that. In like, I like even hear my friends that like will talk about like someone who wants to leave a relationship, and like in the back of my mind I'm like, it's not that easy as to be like, okay, just walk away. It's not like a normal relationship that has just gone sour. Like, it's so much more complex than that.
And there's a lot people aren't telling you.
Yeah.
There's so much more below surface level that people don't tell you, people don't show you. A lot happens behind closed doors.
Maybe they don't understand it either, like fully understand what they're going through, so they can't even explain it to you because they can't explain it to themselves. They don't understand it either.
Yeah.
You're comfortable talking about like what other PTSD like symptoms you had, or like what other...
I find new things out every day.
You still find them?
Oh yeah. My current boyfriend, I think this was with him. I wanted to show him the first episode of American Horror Story.
Oh gosh.
On the same couch. And that was really triggering. And I didn't even think about it until it happened, and I went, oh. Things like that. I have a very hard time with people being upset with me or yelling at me, or being disappointed in me. I will shut down. And sometimes it's totally random and I don't know why. That, you know, everything will be fine and then all of a sudden I will be like a stone statue, and I won't be able to move and I won't be able to speak, and I'm just kind of stuck. And my boyfriend has learned to just kind of reach out to me at that point and to hug me and hold on to me until I can ground myself and get back to where I'm supposed to be. But it's little things that you would have never, you know, thought would be different types of PTSD, like the American Horror Story show, or if someone looks at me the wrong way, or if I see a tall blonde man, you know, anything related to the situation. I can't pick up the phone anymore. I don't answer phone calls that I don't recognize, because of the amount of times he would create fake numbers and call me. I can't do that. It's so much, so many different things.
Do you feel like there was like you forgot like certain things like happened, and then like something triggers you to remember like a certain memory that happened then?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I wish I had better examples. I wish I had more reasons, but thankfully it's been a while since I've had one of those moments. I'd say it's been probably about 6 months to a year since I've really had like a triggering moment. Yeah. One of them just kind of resurfaced, but couldn't think about it. Like, sorry. I like kind of thought of one, but I don't really remember it enough to describe it, you know?
Yeah. Okay, so you're in school. So what are you going to school for?
I was actually going to be a police officer. Thank God my boyfriend looked at me. This is what I needed. This is what I needed. I'm a double major in psychology and criminal justice. And I was going the police officer route. It was either that or therapy. And one day my boyfriend looked at me and he goes, "Gwen, you are a weenie." I was like, thank you. I'm like, I've been waiting for someone to tell me that. Jesus. So he's like, yeah, you don't have the guts to be a police officer. I'm like, thank God. I'm like, okay. So then I went the therapy route and focused more on that. And I had always had this dream since after my first instance of abuse, after the time that I had read the book that I was talking about a little bit earlier, I had decided that it was my time to reach out and find like support groups, or find instances where therapy was a little bit more directed at sexual assault and relationship violence, and there wasn't anything. We called, and all these places are for adults who are survivors, but none of them are for children. So it was my dream for years now that I wanted to create an organization with support groups, or an organization that brings these kids together so that they're able to talk when they're ready to get to that stage. So I finished up my double major, my bachelor's, here next spring, not this spring, next spring. And then I am gonna continue my education to get my master's in MPA? Master's in public something. I wish I could tell you. We really just hammered this out like over Christmas. That will enable me to then go on to either create my organization or to partner with existing organizations to create programs for kids who are victims of sexual assault and relationship violence. My goal is to eventually have a organization that not only provides support groups, but also STD testing, lawyers to pursue cases, as well as classes that meet to teach healthy relationships. Because as much as I love the public school system, we do not have a great education when it comes to relationships and healthy living. It's very outdated, like the 80s or 90s. And one of the things that I noticed especially was that we have no education whatsoever about technology, and I feel like that is a pivotal part of our generation, and it needs to frankly be addressed and in our education, especially since relationships now revolve around phones and computers and social media. Yes. And so I want to eventually go on to create a curriculum that I can either teach within my organization for low-cost classes, or to implement it in the school system as part of their curriculum. So that's kind of my goal.
Okay, is there anything else you think we missed that we should talk about?
Be safe. Be safe.
Be safe.
Be smart.
Be smart. Go to therapy if you need it.
Go to therapy no matter what.
Therapy? Oh, therapy is...
We found out we have the same therapist.
While I was doing her hair. But we've known each other for a long time.
She knew me while all this was going on.
We've known each other since...
my sophomore year of high school.
So my junior...
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so since my junior year of high school, that's been... I don't even know how many years.
I'll end it with saying this. My mother, who is a therapist, very intelligent lady, she tells me that people always come into her office and think that they are crazy for coming to therapy. And she said, she always says that the crazy people are the ones that are crazy and don't believe in therapy and don't believe in coming to therapy to address that. And the crazy people are the ones that come in that actually want to address their issues and talk about it. So, go to therapy.
Go to therapy. Moral of the story? No.
Go to therapy.
Be safe. Think about yourself. It's okay to be selfish sometimes.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And
you can't be selfless.
You can always reach out to either one of us to talk about any of your situations. We would be more than willing to listen or point you in the direction of someone who can help you. Anyways.
I'll drop my social media down below.
Have a great rest of your day.
You too.